Welcome to Law Talk with Peter Meyer.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Law Talk with Peter Meyer. I'm Matt Skye. Peter provides personalized and professional representation for personal injury and wrongful death cases across Georgia, empowering injured individuals to recover financially and hold those responsible accountable. Peter, thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, Peter, first question, what initially drew you to pursue a career in law?
That's a good question. There's probably several answers, but basically, in the law, you can make a difference, whether it's to one person or an entire family, or even setting a legal precedent for the entire state or the country. So I guess I was drawn to the idea of making a living while also fighting for something that I believe in. Maybe that sounds idealistic, but that was the initial appeal. The challenge and excitement of fighting on behalf of someone who has, in my practice, been injured, can't pay their bills, has some type of permanent disability, or maybe a family that's lost a loved one due to somebody's negligence. It's incredibly rewarding. So in a nutshell, I'd say the challenge of building and presenting a case, the fun of the detective work you do behind the scenes, and really the satisfaction that we see when it kind of all comes together. That's the big picture of what drew me to this profession.
And what would you say led you to specifically focus on personal injury? There's a lot of different areas you can go into when you enter law.
Well, like a lot of people when I was in law school, what I thought I wanted to do changed a bit, but I primarily wanted to be a prosecutor when I went to law school. But after spending a little bit of time at the DA's office, I realized that wasn't for me. In my third year of law school, I got an internship with a really successful local lawyer here in Middle Georgia who handled injury and death cases. And this exposed me to the litigation process, and I saw what it was like to fight against these huge insurance companies on behalf of injured people, clients who would otherwise never have the resources to win a case like that. And so it was exciting to see what it was really like because, all people see are these fake TV shows or those horrible lawyer commercials that are on TV. And the reality of it was very different for me. So I clerked for that firm, and then he offered me a job right out of law school. And because that was a really successful small firm, I got a tremendous amount of trial experience and learned how to work a case from the ground up. So a lot of my friends from law school were working for large firms, doing paperwork in the basement while I was meeting clients, doctors, taking depositions, and trying cases all over Georgia. So basically, the first time I assisted with a trial, I knew that's where I needed to be.
You mentioned the sort of misconceptions of trial on TV and whatnot. What was the biggest difference you saw? Just curious.
The amount of work that goes behind the scenes and the things that people never see, our clients don't even see, when you have to actually get out in the field and talk to witnesses and gather evidence. And that can be, me and my staff, standing in the middle of a highway, taking pictures and measurements and trying not to get run over or going to a record yard. And I've had it happen
where personal injury case on top of the case. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had it happen where, one case we ended up winning because of evidence we found on the defendant's vehicle, which was in a record yard. And unbeknownst to us, the record yard had some dogs in it. Wow. After we took our pictures, I remember running out of there and jumping over the fence barely before we got bitten by this Rottweiler. So those are the things that you don't see on TV. And really, it's just dealing with the clients. And people don't understand what really happens to a person or a family when somebody's hurt and they suddenly can't work or they're disabled. There's a lot of things like that you just don't see on TV or in those commercials.
Well, for sure. It sounds like that detective side is something that people don't see, and that's a very interesting angle. Actually, it would make a great series of shows. Let me ask you a little bit about your educational background. How have those experiences prepared you for working on behalf of your clients in personal injury matters?
Well, I think the thing that prepared me was working since I was a second-year law student in this field, in a firm that just had a really high volume of injury cases of all different types. So injury and death cases, that's all I've done for more than 25 years. So at our firm, we do not handle divorce. We don't handle criminal law. This is our specialty. That's all we do, personal injury and wrongful death. And being immersed in this specialty for so many years, I feel like I've seen almost everything, from building the case to proving the case. And from doing it all these years, I've learned all the tactics that the insurance companies use and that their lawyers use. And we've just won, tens of millions of dollars for our clients all over the state. And also, we have won cases and tried cases in small rural towns and big city in Atlanta and everywhere in between.
Now, something that just hits me is you're a very upbeat guy with a good, cheery mood. How do you keep that when you're dealing with, so many intense cases, so many really, really devastating cases?
I think that it just kind of helps to have perspective. We're here to help and to provide the best service possible to our clients. And, it's like any other profession. You can see a teenager, up at the spinal clinic in Atlanta who's never going to walk again, or meet a family who's lost a husband or a child. And, our job is to not break down. We frequently do that back in the office or when we get home. It's to do the work for them. So it makes that process just a little bit easier, a little bit less stressful. So they don't have to worry about paying the bills. They don't have to worry about dealing with an insurance adjuster who, may be trying to deny their claim. Or, we try to take all of that out of the equation. And I think focusing on doing the work for these people and helping them out is what keeps you from, it allows us to keep our upbeat spirit. And, in the end, we're here to help people. So I think that's where that comes from.
Would you say that is the aspect that's most fulfilling, or is there another aspect that's most fulfilling when you're dealing with these cases?
That's a good question. And unless you've been hurt or had a death in the family due to someone's negligence, you may not know what people go through. And my clients, I've represented every type of client, from rich to poor and everything in between. But most of our clients are working class folks. So even a seemingly simple accident can be devastating. I mean, every day, it's not just we take the case and then we, get a big verdict or a settlement check. I mean, every day we help people through the process. They may not have a car to go to work or take the kids to school because the insurance company is dragging their feet. We handle a property damage claim. We don't charge anything for that. Sometimes they're out of work and they suddenly have no money to pay rent or put food on the table, or they're getting buried in medical bills. In many cases, they don't have health insurance, and so they're not able to see a doctor. So we have to assist. We can help our clients find medical treatment, whether it's physical therapy, chiropractic. I've had clients with no health insurance who needed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of surgery and post-op treatment, and we've been able to arrange that. So that worrying about being disabled or just not being the same person. My goal is to just help my clients, to help people through this process from beginning to end. When I see that smile and relief on their faces after winning their case, that's really a huge reward. That's the short answer to your question.
You relate a lot of different logistics and challenges that your clients come to you with. How do you navigate all those different challenges, and how do you help them out the other side? Not
to be too technical, but the thing that people need to remember is that we, the plaintiffs, the injured party, the party bringing the case, we have the burden of proof in every case. The defense, the insurance company, they don't have to prove anything. So in every wrongful death case or injury case, we have to essentially prove three things: negligence, proximate cause, and damages. So on negligence, we have to show that the defendant was at fault, meaning they had a duty to exercise ordinary care and they failed to do so. Something simple as speeding, failing to yield. Or in a premises liability case, failing to prevent a hazardous condition or to correct a condition that they knew was there or should have known was there. Proximate cause is something we fight over all the time. It's another element of the damages that we have to prove. So we have to show that those damages were caused by this negligent act rather than a pre-existing condition or some other cause. And insurance companies love pre-existing conditions. So, and on the damages aspect, we have to prove the damages: medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, which is the most difficult, putting a dollar amount on, on your physical pain and your anxiety. Those, and all of those damages can be past and future. Or in a wrongful death, we have to prove the value of the life of the person who died in the accident. And we could do a whole show on wrongful death cases. So, some cases we're only fighting over one of those three elements: negligence, damages, or proximate cause. In some cases we're fighting all three. Some cases we're fighting only one. But this is why you need an experienced lawyer handling the case from the start.
How do you define damages? And when you talk about when someone dies, that seems like an invaluable damage.
Well, the damages in a wrongful death case, you have pre-death pain and suffering, if that's applicable, the value of the life. As I said, we could do a whole show on wrongful death. It's the economic and non-economic value of the life as a provider, as a wife, as a husband. And that's where you have to sometimes hire an economist to show what that person would have earned throughout their entire lifetime, which, if you have a younger person, that can be even more challenging. And in an injury case, the damages of lost wages, it can be straightforward if you're a salaried employee and the doctor says you're out for this period of time. But a lot of my clients are self-employed. And so if you're self-employed, maybe you have a kind of a cash business, we have to spend a lot of time with them getting documents, receipts, bank account statements, tax records, and putting together, how much were you earning and how long were you out and how much did you lose? So, the damages can be the trickiest part because you're trying to put a number on what they've lost, which is not always so easy, especially the pain and suffering part.
Is there one aspect of the damages you find most difficult to prove or easiest to prove for that matter?
I think that really varies and depends on the case. I mean, lost wages, as I said, if I had one guy who, he was a produce salesman and he went to the farmer's market selling fruit. And we literally had receipts going back years of how much fruit he sold. It sounds silly, but to him, that was his livelihood. So, we get in the weeds and show how much he made. He fed his family based on that. So lost wages for a self-employed person can be challenging. Pain and suffering is the hardest. And, there are a number of brilliant lawyers who argue it differently. I've been in court where I've said, what would this be worth to you, to the jury, to not be able to do to do your job or to not be able to do the things around your house, to play with your children. The day-to-day things that we take for granted. You have to really get to know each client individually and focus on their what their life is, because there's not one formula. Everybody thinks there's just a formula. You take medical expenses and use that. There's an element of that, but really, if you want to get the maximum recovery, you have to get to know each client and how this has impacted their life and personalize it. And then try to put a dollar value on it that a reasonable juror will understand.
When you're presenting to jurors, how much of that is that hard data you're speaking of, and how much of it is an emotional case, an emotional plea to the jury? How do you make that distinction?
For my client, it's always an emotional decision. It's not just dollars and cents. And I think it's a balancing act because you want to humanize your client. Whether it's a settlement negotiation, a mediation, or a trial, we need to humanize. And I want the defense lawyers, I want the adjuster, and I want the jury to see my client for who he or she is and to understand what they went through. I can tell you a brief story of a case that shows both the cynical side of being on the defense side and how we humanized it. I represented this really elderly man in Lawrence County, Georgia. And him and his wife came to see me, and he was salt of the earth, old school. I don't want to sue anybody. I don't want to deal with anything. And his wife finally dragged him in 2 days before the statute of limitations ran, have you. This sounds really simple. He's in his pickup truck. He gets rear-ended. He has his arm on the wheel. I don't know if you can see this on camera. And he tears his rotator cuff, right, on his left side. The insurance company looks at it and they say, well, this is a really old guy. He had a lot of arthritis. We think that it's not that big of a deal. It's probably pre-existing. And they essentially offer him nothing. And what they didn't know was this fellow was born right-handed, and he had to drop out of school and work on his family farm and had a serious injury to his right hand, basically making it useless as a teenager. So his entire adult life, his left hand was everything. He built a home with his left hand. He raised his kids with his left hand. The first child went to college in the history of the family with him working in a lumber factory with his left hand. And all this defense lawyer and adjuster were focused on was, this is an old man with arthritis. And he had pre-existing records this high of arthritis. But he was able to do everything. And once that rotator cuff was torn, if anyone's ever had that, you can't do anything with that arm until it's fixed. And he had to, for the first time in his life, rely on his wife to do everything for him for months and months and months. And he got back, but not 100%. By humanizing that and letting the jury see that this isn't just an old man who got rear-ended who's looking for money because he had a rotator cuff tear. This is a man who, was a survivor who used that arm for everything in his entire adult life. And for the first time in his adult life, he was dependent on everyone else for everything. And this guy was so tough. He was salt of the earth. And when the jury came back with that 6-figure verdict, he cried. And then I cried. I didn't let him see that. And his wife came up to me crying and said, that is the first time I have ever seen him cry. that is how we try to balance the personal and the clinical part of it. I hope that answered your question.
No, it's a powerful story, and I think it shows the real human story behind this. I think sometimes we get caught up in thinking this is legal, but this is also human. So as we wrap up, what are your aspirations or goals within the field of personal injury law? And then just how do you see your own practice evolving over time?
The law is constantly changing, so we really try to stay on top of the legal aspects of it. And being a member of the Georgia Trial Lawyers Association and the American Trial Lawyers Association is helpful because, people don't realize that lawyers really share a lot of information and work together. And so I've had the privilege of working with the best lawyers in the state and in the country on some very complex cases. And so you stay up on the law and, the current cases and tactics and how to handle things. And also the technology. I'm not the biggest tech guy in the world, but we have the top of the line legal software and other products that we need to present our case. And so I think that the experience that we have in this firm, the associations we have with the other trial lawyers, staying on top of technology, I think that's really how we kind of see our practice, evolving with the times over the future. And I've done nothing but this for 25 years, and we just want to continue to present the best possible representation for our clients going forward.
It's a great point to wrap up on. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to Law Talk. For more information and to connect with Peter Meyer, visit meyerlawfirm.net. You can also find him on social media. Peter, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.